Good morning. Welcome to Breakfast with Dan Walker and Sally Nugent.
The headlines for you at 6 o'clock this morning. The fatal car explosion outside a hospital in Liverpool. MI5 are called in to help with the investigation after one man died.
Liverpool Women's Hospital remains cordoned off this morning. Properties are being searched at other locations across the city and some homes have been evacuated. 3 men have been arrested under the Terrorism Act.
6 months after a damning report into the BBC's handling of Princess Diana's 1995 Panorama interview, her brother tells this programme he believes there is more to come out.
It's clear to me that there are certain people who were in the BBC who have behaved in a way that is truly abysmal and possibly criminal.
What is a fair salary? Good morning. The rate of the real living wage goes up today. I'll explain what difference it can make to low-paid workers and why more employers are opting into the scheme.
Oh, how good was that? Owen's Jonathon is officially recognised as the most successful 24-hour challenge in Children Need's 41-year history.
Wow, yesterday the temperature in the Highlands reached nearly 16 degrees. This week it's going to stay mild, mostly dry, any heavy rain likely to be in the north and the west, especially of Scotland. But next week it's turning much colder. I'll have all the details later in the programme.
It is Monday the 15th of November. Our main story. The security service MI5 has been called in to assist counter-terrorism police investigating yesterday's car explosion outside a hospital in Liverpool.
One man has been killed and another injured in that incident. 3 men have been arrested under the Terrorism Act after several houses were evacuated in the city. James Reynolds reports, and it does contain some flashing images.
The police say they are working at speed to establish the circumstances of the car explosion just outside the Liverpool Women's Hospital in central Liverpool. It happened shortly before 11 o'clock yesterday morning, at a time when Remembrance Day services were about to begin across the country. The driver survived the blast. The passenger, who has not been named, was killed.
Unfortunately, I can confirm that one person has died and another has been taken to hospital where he is being treated for his injuries, which thankfully are not life-threatening. So far, we understand that the car involved was a taxi, which pulled up at the hospital shortly before the explosion occurred.
In the Kensington area of Liverpool, around a mile from the explosion, 3 men, aged 21, 26 and 29, were arrested under the Terrorism Act. This gives the authorities the power to hold detainees for up to 14 days without charge. And late at night, a number of homes in Liverpool's Rutland Avenue and nearby Cumberland Avenue were evacuated. They're reported to be close to a house which was raided by the police in the hours after the incident. Counter-Terrorism Police Northwest are leading the overall investigation. They're supported by officers from Merseyside Police, and the security service, MI5, is also assisting. Investigators say they're keeping an open mind as to what caused the explosion. James Reynolds, BBC News.
Well, let's get a bit more on this right now. Our reporter Andy Gill is outside Liverpool's Women's Hospital this morning and can bring us the very latest. Good morning, Andy.
Morning, Dan. Yes, Liverpool's Women's Hospital remains cordoned off this morning. It's a large site and there's police tape around the entire perimeter. Police still patrolling the grounds. The hospital has said that until further notice, visiting will be restricted. Yesterday, people were being diverted when they had appointments to other hospitals. We're told that appointments will be going ahead as normal today, but people can expect delays, and they've been told they'll see significant security increased around the site. Now, this one of 3 locations across Liverpool at the centre of this investigation. To the north of here, around Sutcliffe Avenue and Bowler Street, is where those 3 men were arrested yesterday aged 29, 26 and 21. And to the south of here, around Rutland Avenue, again, police presence there yesterday. Some homes were evacuated there. Counter-terrorism police, as you've heard, are keeping an open mind about what may be behind this. They were told also that Priti Patel, the Home Secretary, is being kept updated about developments. Yesterday, the Prime Minister Boris Johnson on social media said his thoughts were with the people of Liverpool. This happened just before 11 o'clock, as we've heard, just before remembrance services were due to take place across the country. Now, yesterday, Liverpool's memorial service was at the Anglican Cathedral, which is a short walk from here. That's unusual. The location where it normally happens is more in the city centre, but because of roadworks, it wasn't happening there. So one person dead in the exploding car, another person believed to be the taxi driver was injured, and police have also said that generally across Liverpool there'll be an increased police presence today. There'll be more patrols on the street. That's in an effort to reassure people.
Andy, thank you for that update. We'll speak to you a bit later on this morning. Elsewhere today, Buckingham Palace says the Queen is disappointed to have missed the annual Remembrance Sunday service at the Cenotaph yesterday after spraining her back.
It is the first time in 22 years that she has missed the event. Our correspondent Helena Wilkinson is in Windsor for us this morning. Helena, this is another public engagement that the Queen has missed. What does that tell us about how her health is at the moment?
Well, Sally, we know that Buckingham Palace say that she missed Remembrance service yesterday, and that is significant given that it is the most significant engagement in the Queen's calendar, but she missed it because of that back sprain. We know that she suffered that back sprain fairly recently because on Thursday, the Palace had said that the Queen would be attending Remembrance Sunday yesterday. So it was a very last minute cancellation. In fact, a couple of hours before that service took place yesterday at the Cenotaph in London. What we also know is that she's not expected to need hospital treatment for that back sprain, but don't forget that the Queen was resting after that overnight hospital stay in central London in the middle of October. She had been resting for 3 weeks, and it had been hoped, it was the Queen's firm intention to be able to attend Remembrance service yesterday. She is resting in Windsor. We are told by the Palace that she is expected to continue carrying out those light duties, but I think probably in the minds of the Palace officials around her, doctors as well, and the Queen, who is 95 years old, don't forget, whether she will have to at some stage scale back those public engagements. But for the moment, she is in Windsor resting on doctors' advice.
Helena, thanks very much indeed. Now, the case of the former Conservative Minister Owen Paterson, which sparked debate over MPs' behaviour, is back in the Commons today.
The government tried to block Mr Paterson's suspension 10 days ago, then made a U-turn after the backlash. Let's speak to our chief political correspondent, Adam Fleming. Adam, good morning to you. What latest development are we expecting today, then?
Well, this represents this motion that will be voted on in Parliament later tonight. The final stage of that U-turn. It's the last bit of the U-turn because it will reverse completely what the government's initial position was on Owen Paterson. They wanted to pause the disciplinary process against him. This will now end the disciplinary process against him by endorsing the report by the Standards Committee in Parliament, which found him guilty of an egregious breach of Parliament's rules for how MPs' second jobs interact with their parliamentary business and how the MPs themselves then interact with the government. It will also end that special committee that the government was going to set up, which was going to look at a change to the rules overall for how MPs are disciplined by looking at whether you could introduce an appeals process. It's also another example of where Number 10 kind of got it wrong in this process, because they initially refused to even have this motion saying, why do you need to censure Owen Paterson when he is no longer an MP anymore? But lots of MPs said, well, otherwise then you've just got to report into his conduct that's left sort of dangling and there's no finality to the process. Also, it might mean that there isn't enough time tonight in Parliament for MPs to actually debate this. So the kind of the cracks in the Tory party and the disagreements within Conservative MPs themselves may not be so on display tonight as they have been in other parts of this process. I also think Number 10 will be relieved that if you look at the papers today, there aren't really any stories about MPs' second jobs or ministers lobbying or MPs lobbying or MPs expenses or anything like that, although Labour are still trying to stir that pot a bit.
It's a very long list. Adam, thank you very much for that. We'll speak to you later.
Now, a 9-year-old boy who was placed in an induced coma after a crowd surge at the Astroworld Festival in Texas has died.
Ezra Blount had been on life support in hospital due to severe brain and organ trauma since that show on the 5th of November. He's the youngest of 10 concert goers to have been killed during rapper Travis Scott's headline performance.
Major improvements in the care for sickle cell patients in England is being called for after serious failings, including unavoidable deaths, were identified in an inquiry. The report by a cross-party group of MPs found there was evidence of substandard levels of care in A&E and a lack of awareness about the condition among staff. NHS England says 10 new centres for sickle cell disease are being set up across the country.
Around 2 million unvaccinated people in Austria have been placed under lockdown measures from this morning as the country faces a surge in infection levels. Anyone over the age of 12 who hasn't received 2 doses of a COVID jab will only be allowed to leave home for limited reasons like working or buying food. The measures will initially last for 10 days.
See the headlines as they happen and watch BBC News live in the app and get the full story with bbc.co.uk/news. Follow the story for all the latest with BBC News.